This is Peter Bailey, who is the Chair and CEO of Arup Australia. Now, Peter, for well over 25 years, has had an amazing career in structural design and engineering on the world stage. He's worked in Sydney, London, New York and Frankfurt. Arup, of course, is one of those amazing companies that is owned by its staff around the world and just does extraordinary work. You would all know, of course, that they were the engineers on the Sydney Opera House, as well as many, many other famous buildings around the globe, but they have an extraordinary approach to the work they do, and of course they're doing a lot of work at the moment at Barangaroo. Now, Arup was named as Employer of Choice for Gender Equality in 2014 by the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, so they're certainly doing something right. The company has received a number of awards in addition to this, including the National Association of Women in Construction Crystal Vision Award in 2011. As one of the male champions of change group, Peter is going to tell us this afternoon about the steps Arup has taken to improve gender diversity in their company. Please welcome Peter Bailey. Thanks, Peter.
It's a great honour to come today and speak to you. As a representative of the engineering industry, it's a great honour to come in and speak to such esteemed people in the science industry, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you also for putting me straight after Louise and that very fine music, and being a Peter as a CEO, that's a tough gig to follow. But I have to say, if Louise is still here, the good news is Peter has been slowly but surely dropping off the baby naming lists over the last few years. So there's an almost certainty about the fact that Peter will be a declining name in CEOs in the future. So I can give you that as a guarantee. And let's hope it is replaced with more female names instead of just more and more Peters and Davids. I can also report that my wife also does get excited when I do housework, so that's an absolute fact. So. Look, I wanted to make it clear before I started that I'm not an expert in this area. I was trained as an engineer. I was educated at Sydney University. I did a Master of Engineering Science. And I'm just standing here as a man, really, just a man who represents myself and represents my company and represents my industry, and recognises that change is needed. And that's simply all I'm trying to do. I'm not an expert, I need lots of advice, I need lots of help, but I'm here to try and drive change. And that's why I've put my hand up to be a champion of change. So amongst Consult Australia, which is all the engineering and services companies in the engineering and construction industries, a number of CEOs have put their hand up and said, we're going to stand for change, and we need to do something about it. So we're putting our hand up. We've recognised that the pace of change is glacial and something needs to change. Intervention is needed. And I do recognise some similarities in the science industry. So it's interesting comparing the two. And you know, engineering relies so much on science. So things like the STEM subject debate and the lack of take-up in our schools is really concerning for me too. I have a daughter at school at the moment, and I really am not happy about the fact that maths and science is being de-emphasised, because it will affect not only our industries but also, I believe, Australia. This is something we will be incredibly left behind in, and we've got to get our act together on this front. So we've got to attract all types of talent through into science and engineering. It is so important for our future. And being part of a global company, this is so obvious to me because I see many other countries doing it so much better than we are, and we are going to be left behind. Asia is doing incredibly well on this front at the moment. So just quickly, Arup is a global firm. We're about 13,000 people. We operate in about 90 offices around the world. We're about 70 years old next year. We were founded by Ove Arup, who is a Danish-English engineer. He was the engineer chosen to work with UNSW on the Opera House, and that's how we started in Australia. But we've expanded from there. We've always grown organically, and culture has been really always at the heart of what Arup does. It's really made the company successful. It's always grown every year. It's always made a profit. It's always done the most amazing projects, such as these ones here. So we think the fact that we have been able to do such great work is because of the people and the culture that we've created. But I stand here saying that even though we do such amazing work, there is still room for improvement in my company. And one area for improvement is in the diversity space. And we're working hard on that. So I was going to take you through a bit of that today. Myself personally, I've been on a journey in Arup. I actually joined after I did my postgraduate degree, so I started here in Sydney, and I've worked my way up through the company, but I got the benefit of travel with Arup. So I worked around the world in many different places, as Kim said, and I now sit on the global board of Arup, looking after the whole operation. I'm really proud that our company is being recognised in the gender equality space. So as mentioned, we are an employer of choice for gender equality. I'm really proud of that. We're one of two companies in our industry that were recognised. There's only 70 odd companies around Australia that get that accolade. That's not many. We need a lot more, actually. But I'm really proud that in engineering, where we struggle with the pipeline of young women coming into the faculties and into universities and through schools, we really have a pipeline problem. That we're still managing to achieve something in our business, which is fantastic. It's no coincidence that we also get recognised by our clients. As I said, I think culture has so much to do with our achieving success in this area. So, what's the problem? What is the problem? What are we facing up against? Now, you've heard a lot today from some from expert speakers. There's been a lot of discussion about what's going on. But there's some fundamental issues that I think are impacting our business today and why we can't get enough women into our industry. And I include science, obviously, in that and the tech industry. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are on Twitter, but who's seen this campaign and this discussion piece on Twitter over the last week or week and a half? Okay, so this is an advert put out by a firm in the US called OneLogin. They were looking to attract more talent and more engineering talent into their organisation. So they got 3 of their staff members to participate in this program. And they were really just trying to show that, they're all different types of people that come into engineering, and they're all different types of people that can succeed. And there is an opportunity for everybody. And much to everybody's surprise, it wasn't the guy over there on the left-hand corner with the black hat and the glasses and the hacker's black t-shirt on that attracted the attention. No, of course, it was the one in the middle that attracted everybody's attention. Okay, so that's Isis Anshali. Her name's been changed in this ad. And I think this neatly summarises a lot of the problems that we're facing. This was what everybody started to talk about. So Twitter went a little bit mad about this, and the comments on social media went a bit crazy. So here's the comments. This is a couple of examples. This is some weird haphazard branding. I think they want to appeal to women, but are probably just appealing to dudes. Perhaps that's the intention all along, but I'm curious, people with brains find this quite remotely plausible if women in particular buy this image of what a female software engineer looks like. IDK, weird. Wow, and then this one. If their intention is to attract more women, then it would have been better to choose a picture with a warm, friendly smile rather than a sexy smirk. I cringe when I read this stuff. I'm ashamed to be a male. Look, I suspect there were probably some women commenting as well, but really, haven't we got past this? This is a bright, young, female tech engineer. I think these negative opinions really completely illustrate that sexism is alive and well in the engineering, science and tech industries. We're just still there. We're still there with those attitudes in our society. But stay tuned, there's a great ending to this story, and with the start of the social media campaign, #ILookLikeAnEngineer, and I'll show you some examples of that shortly. But with such prevailing sexist attitudes towards women in scientific careers, it's no wonder we're bleeding. I'll stay with this one. It's no wonder we're bleeding with bright young female talent to other lives. So we're losing women to other lives. They're not staying with us in engineering. They're not staying with us in science. And I find it completely untenable, those statistics up there for engineering. only 9.5% of women are practicing engineering. 50% of these are under 30. And then look at that for a drop-off rate. Only 15% of female engineers over 40 are still in the profession. That is disgraceful. Look at that talent that we are missing out in engineering, and boy does our country need it now. It is just untenable to me, and I want to do something about it. So with those pipeline issues for us in engineering, we've got a big problem to face. We've got to virtually shift society. But the Women in Science Inquiry Network also illustrates that in many ways science is struggling even more than engineering. And I include, architecture is in a similar place. It's wonderful now that women represent over 50% of higher degree research students. That is fantastic that tick the pipeline is good. But women continue to be poorly represented in senior positions, and only 23% of senior positions, as we saw, are occupied by women, and only 11% of the Academy of Science are women, the fellows in the Academy of Science. So what does that say for career progression? What is that saying to our young women? What's that saying to my daughter in year 9? Is there a career path for you there? So really, can you be yourself and be an engineer or a scientist or an architect or a technologist? And why should women and girls take these careers the way they are? And I think men have a lot to answer in this front. And I'll share a little story with you. As champions, we talk about our light bulb moment. Well, for me, when I was newly married, my wife and I, who's an architect actually, we travelled overseas and we got some amazing experience working in London. So we both got an incredible, diverse array of international experience. And then we thought we'd come back to Australia and start our family here in Sydney. And of course I was moving around with Arup, so I had the opportunity to come straight back in and I was well looked after. But Sandy had to look for a job as an architect with the local practices here. And at the same time as saying we wanted to figure out a way to make this work, and so she looked for part-time work. She was completely and utterly rejected by every single practice in Sydney, despite a stellar CV. And this made me really, really mad at the time. I remember thinking, what on earth are these male-driven architectural practices doing when they're rejecting such talent? There was virtually no female architectural partners at that time. And, that says it all. But they just couldn't find a way. And matter of fact, they said, look, you can't just work 3 to 4 days a week. You've got to work 6 days a week because that's what all architects do. So unless you can do that, don't bother. So I was really, really angry about this, and I was thinking, that architecture profession, they really haven't got their act together. But then over the coming months and years, I started to realise that actually the real problem was me. So the problem was me. It was my attitude that was the problem. I expected Sandy to do the part-time work. I expected her to take the hit on her career. It was me that just kept sailing away and progressing in my career. And it wasn't, and she was the one that had to take the penalty. Now, I'd argue whether she really wanted to work 6 days a week. Not many of us do. But in the end, she was denied that opportunity, and it was my fault, I think. I can blame everybody I like out there for that situation. And, there's probably plenty of people to blame. But it's me and it's men like me that are the problem, because we're standing in the way of talent. And that's a humble thing to stand up there and confess, and it took a while to sink in, I'd have to say. But ever since that point in time, I've become a champion for change, because we've got to change this. It is so important. Our country needs it, our industries need it, my business needs it, and our families need it. So we've got to change. And I think if you actually look around the Champions for Change, you'll see similar light bulb moments. I think the WGA brought out something called Daughter Water, which was if CEOs have a daughter, they're more likely to be gender willingness to discuss gender diversity at work. So anyway, I've drunk the water. The change needs to happen. So what's the current situation at Arup? Well, we're working hard on it, but we are not going as well as we should. The nice thing is we have a strong culture, which was started by Arup. He was blessed with a Scandinavian upbringing, which, if you know the Scandinavian values, it's all about equity and social consciousness and the like. So that was injected into the company from an early age. And I think that's one of the reasons for our success. And things like these sort of statements in 1970, and there's numerous ones he made, speak of diversity as being the very essence of the success of the firm. He spoke very little about engineering. He spoke about people and getting the best people and including everybody and giving opportunity for as many people as possible. That was the key, and I think it's really part of our success. He called it unity and enthusiasm. Today we call it inclusion. But there it is. We must include to include as many as people as possible, as often as possible. So the question we've got to ask ourselves is, how do we succeed? Who's on your team? Now, I've shown up there an example of a card that we use. So we use little cards to start discussion groups. And these are diversity discussion cards. And we've got a pack of about 50 of them. And on each one, we pose a question and a problem. And on the back, if you flip the card over, it's got some facts and figures and some interesting background behind that particular thing. So you'll see some of the cards I flick up to you as I talk through today. But for instance, this one, who's on your team? Well, that very essence of culture I think is important, but diversity improves decision making. We need the best people to solve these engineering problems. We need the most widest points of view. If we have this very stereotyped male Anglo-Saxon view of a problem, how on earth are we going to have the best solution? How on earth are we going to find out the best way to do it? Diversity will produce the best solution. I believe it's so important in the engineering space, but also in science. How on earth can we tackle the challenges in science without that diverse point of view, that diverse background in our people? So I see this as a business critical issue. Absolutely business critical. Now, I'm sure you've heard today about all the studies that have confirmed that businesses with gender diverse boards and a balance of female leadership are more successful and perform better financially. And I'd have to support that. I think that's absolutely true. We in our business now accept that as fact, and we have to do something about it. Surely the same could be said, if business can say that, surely the same can be said about that in the fields of science and research. So are you really having the best success that you possibly can if you don't have diverse leadership? I think better outcomes will emerge from that diverse range of talent. So this is our journey that we're on. Here's some stats. So if you can't quite read that, 2005 to the left, in the middle is 2010, 2015. So in a pipeline of engineering at university that's about 15% female, we've got a 36 to 37% female business. Now, I don't think that's good enough. I'm not happy with that. I think we've got to get to 40% at least until we have a critical mass. A lot of people talk about the 40-60 balance being break-even point. You just got to get to that point. 50-50 would be perfect for me, but I've got to recognise the pipeline issue. But we've been growing our leadership, so that pipeline is now starting to work through. We've got a policy now to take in 50% female graduates, despite the fact that only 15% of them are female. So we're swinging the balance that way, and it's bringing this wave of talent through the firm, and it's really exciting. They are brilliant. The young female engineers are just top-notch. They are so good at it. I don't know why anybody could ever perceive that this is not a career for women. I have to accept that it's the societal norms that we've all painted around that, this kind of macho culture that exists in engineering. We've just got to change that. These are great careers for women, as is science. So we've got to work our way through that. So we're on a journey, but we're not there yet. We've got a lot of work to do, and in particular, that principal level, that's just not good enough. It's got to get better and better, and we're working on that. But I'm excited by that wave of talent coming through the firm. But we do still suffer that loss of female talent 10 years in. Like everybody's been talking about, we suffer the same problem, and we've got to get over that. I've set up there policies and initiatives or culture. Now, we've got every policy that you could ever imagine for gender diversity, and you've heard about lots of them today, so I'm not going to go into them. But I think actually the policies are a kind of a ground level. That's what you just got to get in place. to enable other things to happen. What I think is important is culture. And I think it's really important that we don't just think about diversity, we think about inclusion. So on that graph up there, if you are just focused on diversity for the sake of it, it can be very expensive, because if you don't include those people, then they're going to leave, and that's going to cost you a lot of money. And if you only have inclusion, you get groupthink, and that's probably just as bad. So what we're looking for is diversity and inclusion. I think that's critical. So we've got a lot of policies that are aimed at diversity and inclusion, and in particular trying to recognise ability rather than gender. If you're male, you're going to succeed. That sort of predetermined, stereotypical, biased view of the world. I'm going to promote a person because they look like me and they're another male. So we've got a lot of policies there where we are trying to recognise ability, and work our way past those predetermined, those preordained stereotypes that we listen to. So things like making sure that all senior positions are advertised, that we have a short list of women on every promotion, recruitment position, every gender, every pay review. We make sure that there's inclusion in all of those discussions and make sure we can overcome this job for the boys. And mentoring, we heard about that earlier. Mentoring and sponsorship, I think, is critically important. There's some statements up there suggesting that women with sponsors are 3 times more likely than women with sponsors to be on the verge of quitting. So we all need help on this journey, and I think it's critically important. We've got a very strong mentoring program. We also have sponsorship programs as well, and I think that's important. We've also got strong employment policies around flexible working and parental leave, etc., etc. And I think, I'm certainly convinced that childcare is the next place to go to for us. It's going to be an important enabler. But after all that, with all those policies, does everybody really feel like they belong? Do you really feel like you belong? In the Athena Factor study by Harvard Business Review, why are women leaving science, engineering and technology? Well, the 5 main reasons are hostile macho cultures, isolation, mysterious career paths, biased reward systems, and extreme work pressures, of course. 4 of those 5 reasons are interrelated. A woman who is one of only a handful of females in her department may experience the old boys network, being excluded socially, feel isolated, and lack access to mentoring, hindering progress. So we've been conscious of this all the time, and as I said earlier, culture is so important. This culture of inclusion has been so important to our success, and it's critical that we get that right. But we've got a lot of work to do. I'm convinced that workplace culture is the fundamental component. Policies are enablers and supporters, but they are actually impotent without the right culture, the culture of inclusion and respect for difference. Once we achieve a critical mass of female leadership, I think it will start to look after itself because it will become self-perpetuating. We'll make sure that the bias won't exist. So that's our target, to get that critical mass. And then finally, challenges and opportunities. Well, there are many. When I think of the immense challenges that are facing our society, from climate change to rapid urbanisation and population growth, to the need for resilience, the one planet resource limitations, population growth and disease, I think I said. We're going to need all minds, all genders, all people of all backgrounds applying their intellect and experience to these problems. We really need everybody on the case, and we're going to need those different points of view. And we've got to overcome things like this, that, are women science-minded? That starts at a very young age. I think it starts with our parents and the way they deal with their kids, and it runs through primary school and right through senior school. And we've got to just challenge this notion. It's in the media. It's, as you saw with ISIS in that campaign. What a load of rubbish that men are more gifted at science and engineering. What an absolute load of toff. It's just rubbish, and we've just got to challenge this every time we hear it. We can't walk past it. So we're very focused on inclusive leadership and unconscious bias training at the moment. We have a lot of people with biased views of the world inside Arup, and we have to challenge them. Everybody has bias. Women, men, everybody has bias. And you've got to challenge that. You've got to hold a mirror up to yourself and say, is that the way I really think? Is that the way I really think? It's quite an eye-opener, and we've had men and women being challenged by that inclusive leadership program, by that unconscious bias program. They've really gone, wow, I never had an idea that I was like that. So that's a key focus for us. But can you change? Men, can you change? Women, can you change? Can we change our attitudes and our biases? It's a really important question, and it's a good one to throw up. I think we've got a lot of work to do in my business in middle management, where some of the key promotion and recruitment and pay decisions are made. Even things like handing the best project to the bloke over there instead of that young woman there who's got talent. Just decisions like that can set people on a path that is not enabling them to fulfil their potential. So I'm really focused on working on our line group and our team leadership and working with them. It doesn't matter, the board might be on board, but if you haven't got your team leaders on board, it's going to fail. So we've got to hold them accountable. But I think one of the interesting things that's an interesting point for men as well, is this completely changing notion of what work is. It's changing in front of our eyes. There's a prediction that within 5 years, so by 2020, half the workforce will be freelancing. And that's driven by not just the ability to work remotely, but also by the millennial generation's desire for freedom and choice in what they do. And the cloud and other digital innovations are going to enable that. So it's going to enable us to be able to choose the work we want to do. Professional services are going more and more online. You're going to be able to get a lawyer online. You can get a lawyer online now. You can get services online. Engineering will be similar. Accounting services, they're all online. It enables experts and people to pick and choose how they interact with the workforce. And that desire for freedom and flexibility is going to come rushing through our workplaces in the future, in the very near future. And if you add to that, the struggles we are having right now with maternity leave, we don't get it right at Arup. We need to work harder at that. How do you keep people engaged when they go off on parental leave or when they take a leave of absence? Wait till the problem emerges with the ageing baby boomer generation. We are all going to have aging parents who are going to need caring for. So the carer challenge, I think, will dwarf the maternity leave challenge. So if we can't get maternity leave right, how on earth are we going to get this? I can see us having, that example of having childcare at work. I can imagine us having to have aged care at work in the near future. It's going to be a big challenge for men and women. You're going to have responsibilities to look after your ageing parents. The system ain't going to look after it. So we've got to change our attitudes to work and how we deal with people that can come in and out of the workplace, and how we can allow them to work flexibly. And that will benefit men and women. And it's going to be so good. If we get it right, it's going to be fantastic. But if we get it wrong, we've got a big problem. So men, let's focus our minds, share the burden and the delight of family, and let's make it work. Okay, that's our older family and our younger families. Let's make it all work. So to finish, here's Isis again, starting the hashtag I look like an engineer. And I was so inspired by this. Here's one young woman saying, I am going to challenge that stereotypical view. I am not a model, I am an engineer. I am not what you think. I am legitimately an engineer, and I'm proud of it. And what's really made me extremely happy is all our talented young and older women in Arup have embraced this. And look at them all posting online, I look like an engineer. They don't look like me, they look like an engineer. And that is so important, that we have challenged this stereotype. And the sense of belonging they get out of being part of this campaign has been incredible. They were so fired up about it. They just rushed to get a picture up there and be part of it. That's the sort of spirit of belonging we've got to create. That's the spirit of belonging we've got to create in the science industry as well. There is an I look like a physicist now, I believe, which you can join into. I'm not sure about all the other types of science, but they're coming in a rush, I think. But that's so good, and I'm really, in one stroke, stereotypes have been squashed, and a sense of inclusion has broken out across our firm, which is great, and across the industry. So, where to from here? I do believe male champions can make a difference. I think we have to make a difference. And men, and there's not many men in the room, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted of the men in the room, but do you see yourself up there? Because most folks are like that. Most of us folks, men, look like that. We stand for nothing more than more of the same. More Peters, more CEOs, more males, more male leadership. That's not the vision of the future for me. Are we stuck in our ways? Do we stand for nothing more than more of the same? I think when men either need to step up or step aside and let this bright young female talent move through. And I love this quote. As one of the male champions of change said, "Let's not pretend that there aren't already established norms that advantage men. Men invented the system, men largely run the system, men need to change the system." We've got to step up. Start seeing people for their talents and their value, and you'll be amazed how much potential you'll see unlocked in your faculty or your workforce. You need to recognise that the gender issue is not about filling quotas, it's about making sure that talent has the opportunity to rise to the top. I guarantee the performance of your teams, your business or your faculty will improve. I've seen it in Arup, it's changed our business, it is so much better than it was. Male champions, I think, can and are making a difference. Change won't happen unless we step up and make it happen. But like me, step up beside women. Don't think we can do it all ourselves. We've got to step up beside women and help build a gender equal world. Thank you.